Morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, semi-fascists, maggots, and of course those dog-faced pony soldiers.
That's right. Well, I don't know. The weather is the weather, right? I mean, it's just when you think you're getting some very nice temperature, it gets a little chilly at night and maybe not quite as warm during the day, but that's depending upon your schedule. Still should allow you to get out to the golf course, I guess.
Yeah, I get off to work at night. I got time for 9 holes, which is great.
Yeah, you're feeling better now.
Yeah, yeah. Knees working a little bit better. I'm not running as much because that was, I got to find another way to get that level of exercise without beating on my knees like that, because I was getting where like it was hard to walk.
No more exploding clubs.
No more exploding clubs yet so far. So far, so good on that one. But it's like I was telling Marty last night. My driver, right? That's what. So Marty gave me the driver I had given him. He just pulled out his bag and said, "Here you go, take this back," right? And so it's been like dating your old girlfriend. You can't remember the bad. You can't remember why you broke up, right? But you remember the good times, right? And so like me and the driver had a little reunion. It's been,
I was, we just had completed the Masters just recently and everything like that, and some of the great stories really are around the caddies, and their relationships, to the players,
right?
And how important the caddies are to the players. I mean, you have
that's a course like that.
Yeah, you've got to have a relationship. You've got to know what your player, what he is likely to use and need in a given situation. Give him a little bit of advice as to what club to use and everything like that. So it's kind of a fascinating, kind of a symbiotic relationship that they have.
Because like at Augusta, now I'm going to get the numbers of this wrong, but there's one point on that course. I think you're on the 12th hole, and you're getting ready to hit your tee shot, and you have to check the flag up on the hill on the 15th green to know what the air's doing aloft, right? You have to know that. Like a caddy knows that, right? But like you're just playing some golf course, you don't know to look for that, right? So the stuff that they know is unbelievable.
Yeah, I can imagine too. Especially if you're a first time player too. I mean,
yeah,
you need somebody who's got some experience to help guide you along, through that whole thing. It's a pretty amazing thing. Golf can be a very intricate sport, and it's fun. It's fun to watch during this time of year. We've got some great golfers out there, and so my wife's from Korea, and that had for years. So it's exploded there and brought many players to the PGA Tour,
especially on the women's side.
Yeah, especially on the women's side. Yeah. No, I was like, yeah, if it's mostly Koreans, or sometimes there's a few Chinese, but it tends to be mostly Korean for that, right?
Yeah.
All right. What's our update into Russia and Ukraine? I mean, the battle continues, but
they're about to get some more American armaments, thanks to our whatever it was that just happened in the House. I think they brought in a young and new speaker, and they wowed him with intelligence reports and made him feel like part of the executive team, and he fell for it, and he got this. He always had the majority. I've said on here and elsewhere that if he would have held the line on Ukraine and on the border security, he could have been speaker for 25 years. But now he looks like somebody who got rolled, and I think it's highly unlikely if Republicans retain control of the House that he will be the speaker in the next term.
Yeah, and even though with Marjorie Taylor Greene and the others that are joining, part of the problem right now anyway is not just the whole election year thing and the kind of being haunted by this very chaotic ousting of McCarthy, but it's really like who really is next in line, or who really would be next that they could do without having to repeat, right?
And that's part of what was wrong with her, her motion to vacate the chair is no one had a really good idea of who to put forward, right? Who could win the votes to prevail. The other thing is one of the things that hurts the Republicans in the House, especially, is you have some, angry, ridiculous people are the property of Democrats. That's something that Democrats have and do and deploy in certain ways. And that's their way. When Republicans try to do that, it doesn't work. It's like we're by constitution, by the way we're made up, we're the party of optimism. We're the party of just let us, do it by our own instincts and it'll work better than the central planning model. That's a really optimistic view of, what you as a person and what you as a society can do. But we have people we have Chip Roy from Texas, who's an awful congressman. He is not introducing anything that would ever pass, and he claims to be the defender of conservative values. And, all those guys are claiming to be the defender of conservative values. And it's more and more in the eye of the beholder what it means to be a defender of conservative values. Right. But, that's his big thing. And, if you don't measure up to his dogma list, then, he's out making, talking point ads for the Democrats for, giving speeches on the floor that they can roll into, attack ads on our candidates. And he is not smart enough to realize how helpful he is to the other side. It's just, I ranted. I showed him my way. I shared my thoughts, and it's like, we're not smart. We have him, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Boebert, we have about 7 or 8 people up there who make us look terrible. And it's hard to get your point of view across when you're arguing it through these people.
Yeah. I mean, it seems, we have this group really, which are, they're really just nothing but a bunch of kind of agitators. They're there to
right. There's no right answer for them, Now, I think Massey, it's like he's defending a principle that it's a little bit, watery from time to time what the principle is and what he's doing to defend it. But it does seem consistent with a point of view, right? I mean, if I think this and then these 10 things flow from that, right? But these other guys, it's just, how angry and demonstrative can I be? How, look at me. I'm the purest one.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're trying to take advantage of this whole, social media video kind of thing where they can get a lot of time, can go viral for things that they say, not really realizing how much that turns against them, and it can hurt the Republicans, longer term, and just kind of leaves people with a bad taste in their mouth. And yeah, it's like, people should be checking legislation that these people are supposed to be, working on, because they aren't really working on anything, right? They're just running around, running their mouths and they stir things up, but
breaking down what other people are trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to your constituents, and it's like, you can say, I did this and I did that in terms of I wanted to get rid of the speaker. I wanted to, I was against. So, but what did you do for the district? What did you do to bring home the bacon? What did you, that type of thing? That makes those people vulnerable potentially, unless you're, in a super strong, Republican district. But even then, that doesn't mean that somebody can't be primaried if they kind of leave the reservation. It's, if as right now, I guess as long as they kind of stick with kind of the Trump message, they're safe, for the most part, right? I mean, the Trump message and staying aligned with Trump seems to overtake everything at this point. But Congress is such a mess. Giving it over to the Democrats is certainly not the answer. Going around this next time around, that's not what we want or need. But the Republicans are just playing into their hands. When you see Republicans retire, midterm or late in the term, and just say, I'm done. I'm not even going to wait till January. I'm not going to wait till October or whatever. We're getting out now. We're getting out months and months ahead of time.
Right. And who is getting out? What Republicans? Non-MAGA.
Right.
Republicans.
Yeah. Right.
Like and one MAGA. It's like 19, and it's like 18 non-MAGAs. So, if you can fill those, you can win those races. You should have a better Congress next time.
Yeah, I mean, and this has been going on. I mean, Trump having Trump in office has led to that. The people who aren't aligned with with Trump, with MAGA, they find themselves kind of boxed in, and they're kind of like, well, I can't get anywhere with this. This is just, I don't, I can't stand the agitators, so I'm getting out. It does kind of remind me a little bit of what happened to the Blue Dog Democrats. They were a powerful force for a lot of years, but they really started to get squeezed. And there's like, where are we going? We don't really want to become Republicans. If some of them did, but and the Democrats were going further and further left, and they're like, oh, well, this is that that old adage, I didn't leave the party left me. And that's
right. And then they made a decision that they weren't going to endorse anybody who was anti-abortion.
Yeah.
Right. So like there was a few people out there, Dan Lipinski and a few others that they were no longer their party's candidate simply because they weren't on the same side on that one issue.
Yeah, which is too bad. I mean, I understand all these politics and things like that, but the part of the question there too. I mean, if you have a solid district in your favor, R's or D's, then I think that's what gives the parties. They look at it and they say, we're just not going to support that person because they're not totally aligned on this issue or whatever. But on the other, in the districts that are a little, more competitive, that they have to weigh that. Do we risk losing the seat over this issue? Or when the person is voting with us, say 85 or 90% of the time, versus someone who'll come in, lose a seat, you won't get anyone. You'll get a Republican or a Democrat, depending upon which part, they'll vote the other way most of the time. So I've always felt that, particularly with the Republicans, they're extremely short-sighted on the overall picture. That I understand the conservative principles. I think it's great when you can get it done like that. But there are some districts in the country where you have to do a little bit of compromise in order to win the seat. And I think getting an R in, to places is much more important than having, this person being having 100% purity on every single issue that you think that they have to look from every single checkbox, right? So
so you people out there in the rest of the world know all the Maryland Republicans think like this. They have no choice.
Right. I mean, that's
how could we win an election? And it's like, speaking of which, though, Hogan's ahead of Trone and Alsobrooks, and the poll came out last week. So we're comfortably ahead, 7-8 points.
Yeah,
I mean, either one of them.
Right. I mean, we don't know what will happen on election day because we're still, quite a ways away from that. But every week, we're knocking off. It's getting that much closer.
That's right.
Hogan is
inside 200 days now, right?
No, it's 100 and what do we have? Yeah, 194. So it's ticking away, and yeah, I mean, you knew exactly where I was with that. My references were living in Maryland, growing up in Maryland, living in Maryland politics. This is a problem. Is that they're hardcore conservatives who believe that you've got to check all the boxes on their list of what the conservative beliefs are, MAGA or whatever. If you're not, then we're not going to support you, and they're going to be facing another big decision here in November. Is that how badly do they want the Republican seat in the Senate versus saying, but Hogan is this and this and this on these issues,
right? And I think if you can get the Senate without dealing with Hogan, it's probably better.
Yeah, I mean, if the
fewer of those kind of people, the better.
Right. If you knew that you could do it, then that's fine. We're not really guaranteed then there, and I think you just want that in your pocket, in your back pocket, as a little safety net. That getting a Larry Hogan in there, would probably ensure that you get the majority. If he loses, you still might get the majority, but you might not. We don't. Voters can be fickle. Things can turn on a dime. There's so many different variables in these elections. You just never really know for sure. So, yeah. I mean, I think I like how I agree that conservatives. I mean, in general, I mean, they're very principled. They stick to their principles. They know what they want. Democrats are not really principled, in that regard. They don't really, and things that they'll accept a lot of things in their candidates, just to get the D in there and whatnot. But it is this. I just wish they would be a little more pragmatic in certain situations, saying, this is how we do this. I've said this so many times. When Hogan was governor, it's like, he got elected and he governed the only way that he could, and a lot of people who voted for him in 2014 thinking like, oh man, this is great. We've got the governor's mansion back. Just didn't realize, is like, they weren't really thinking, it's like, he was going to be hamstrung by an overwhelmingly Democratic, legislature. So he had some levers that he could use to enact certain things, executive order type of things like that he could do, but they were not going to be major pieces of, they're not going to be major pieces of legislation. And, and Hogan was smart enough to know too, that, if he worked across the aisle a little bit, he might get a little bit of something that moved the needle a little bit more in his direction. And the Democrats weren't.
Yeah, the main thing there is you're stopping things more than starting.
Right. He's basically there as a blockade.
You're preventing leftist craziness.
Yeah, he can veto legislation, forcing them to override the veto.
Which they didn't really do a lot. They don't really have the votes to override.
Surprisingly not. They didn't really do that. But this legislature seems to me has only become more liberal over time. I mean, they actually had, with Mike Bush and Mike Miller leading, the various chambers, those guys were actually pretty decent guys.
Right. That's right.
When they left, they were replaced by people who were much further to the left than they were. And, and so we see a lot more, we said a lot of crazier legislation, more legislation to look to find how much more can we tax people and things like that. It's like, not thinking that, oh, by the way, if you tax more people, they might actually leave the state. Like California, if you tax businesses, they might leave the state. And then your budget will then go totally down the toilet because you don't have the tax revenue that you had before.
The high tax system doesn't work. I mean, everyone who tries it fails at it.
Yeah, but there's something been going on since the days of here in Maryland of Martin O'Malley, where, it's like, they look to California and they're enamored of California, and they think California politics, that is a blueprint for their success here in Maryland. And so the Democrats want that same type of thing, because we've seen a lot of similar legislation, proposed and sometimes passed in Maryland that have occurred in California. And it's like, well, this is, to me, that's a disaster waiting to happen in a lot of cases. But, when you have a legislature that has, as much power or sway as they do, they can kind of do it with a lot of impunity. So getting Hogan in there who can kind of slow it down, that was good. And, now they've got a Democrat, governor. Part of the problem, and then the Republicans, they didn't really build a bench. This has also been a problem for Maryland, is that they did not build a bench to succeed Hogan. Boyd Rutherford was never going to be the answer in Maryland. So, but they didn't have another answer as to somebody who would run a good, strong campaign, in essence. And so, and I guess part of it too was this, Dan Cox. I guess he kind of outmaneuvered Kelly Schultz. Schultz was a good candidate, but not a great candidate. And that, and she just didn't have enough to beat back the Cox MAGA wing. And then you put Dan Cox up against Russ Moore, and you're just kind of like, well, there's really stark differences. I mean, even Democrats who left, to vote for Hogan over the last, 8 years, came back home,
right?
Went for Moore, because they just, they're like, there's just no way in heck we're voting for Dan Cox, because that's just way too far for me, and that, and people like that wind up doing a lot of damage to the party, because still now to this day, I mean, there's still a lot of dissension in the ranks about how they lost that race, and the credibility of a Cox, and why he, how did he get nominated and everything, win the nomination, et cetera, et cetera. But they, Wes Moore's got he has 2 terms in office in all likelihood, because I don't know that the Republicans can find anybody credible to run up against an incumbent governor, because now you're going to have your job is even harder this next time around.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We had the Senate. We had the primaries in Pennsylvania, so there'll be a Senate race between McCormick and Casey. I mean,
get slaughtered in that.
Yeah. I mean, it's
McCormick's not much of a statewide candidate. He just doesn't really appeal. That's why people got all over Trump, because Trump backed Oz. Oz had a chance. McCormick did not, and it's the same thing now.
Yeah. So that's a pretty safe seat for Casey, but it would have been interesting.
But it could go Casey Trump, right? Trump's ahead there now.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Is just that Biden's out there talking about how they're doing just fine, but every single poll that comes out shows him, trailing in virtually all the battleground, swing
trailing in 6 of the 7 battlegrounds. He's tied in the other, and he's way behind in the popular vote. And now it looks like there's a state or two where he may not even get on the ballot. Like one is Alabama, and one is maybe Ohio, and that alone would mean that he would lose the popular vote.
Yeah, and that is a strange thing. Is that how does an incumbent president not get on the ballot? I mean,
they did their convention too late. He won't officially be the nominee until after Alabama prints the ballots. That's what they're telling him.
Yeah, and
so they need to figure out a way to officially make him the nominee before the convention, which sort of steps on your convention,
Yeah. And whose fault is that? I mean, in terms of
right. No one bothered to look up if doing it that late would be a problem.
Yeah, I think the assumption is, and I don't see this as a bad assumption in general, is that the nominee, we'll have a convention nominee will be on all the ballots, and there's never really been a problem about this before, but scheduling does matter. I mean, there are deadlines in these states to get on the ballot for various offices, and you better pay attention to that, because if you decide to have a late convention, you could run afoul of this and create this.
It's really late too. It's like the last week of August.
Yeah.
So what are you waiting for?
Yeah, I don't know about that. Is that some kind of damage control in the?
I'm wondering if you're hoping that if you go that late, a lot of students will be back in school, because it's supposed to be in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to. And Chicago's been a problematic city for the Democrats over the years, and this promises to be at least that problematic, right? They have, there's a big debate in Chicago over immigration, because there's so many of these. They're closing down facilities that Chicagoans use to give them to illegal immigrants because of the housing crisis, right? And the mayor and the governor, want to bring in more illegal immigrants, and the people in Chicago are getting fed up. They're losing ground to people who don't even belong here. So they got quite a mess. Plus who knows if the Palestinian-Israeli situation will be in any better place at that point, right? You could have Grant Park overtaken by protesters again, and and it's starting to look like there's starting to be some similarities to '68, right? You have a beleaguered Democrat president, buffeted by wars that haven't gone well for him, protests within his party all over the place. These are all Democrats down there at Columbia. These are all Democrats and on these college campuses, screaming out Jew hatred, right? Those are not Republicans down there doing that. That's Democrats. You're marking yourself as intolerant racist, right, on one of the most controversial issues of the day. There's nothing you can do about it.
I mean, the Democratic National Convention of '68. So I was all of 9 years old at the time. So it's pretty. There's a lot of stuff that's fuzzy, but it was horrible for the Democrats.
Yeah, and what I remember about it is you're like, okay, these guys aren't in control of anything. They can't win an election. They can't even control the park outside their hotel.
Yeah, and so for a lot of people, except for us older folks, who even though we were children back then, it's not something that a lot of people understand or what happened back then. But I think you're right. I mean, I think you can draw some comparisons between '68 and this one coming up because of the situation that Biden is in, the turmoil within the party, the other things, the other external forces that are out there that are buffeting him at this point in time, and just kind of making a very tough path for him, which I think this becomes a very interesting election because the incumbent president is really under a lot of fire, a lot of pressure, with no guarantee that he could win again, and that would be terribly embarrassing for the Democrats. And that's why you have some that jump ship and criticize him and trying to shake the party up, but it doesn't. They're wedded to him. They're saying that he's the guy, Joe's the guy.
Right. There's nothing they can do about it now because
Yeah.
you ballot access would be a nightmare. RFK is finding out you can't get on these ballots. It's got to be Joe.
Yeah, the Democrats made a big deal of having, RFK's, the Kennedy family come out and make this big, staged, this event. Oh, we're all for Joe and everything like that. It's like that to me is more like they're worried that
Right.
RFK was going to pull votes away from Joe, and they just want to remind Democrats is that you need to vote for Joe. Don't think about voting for RFK Jr. Please do not do that. That I think is just a warning signal that when you get worried, you start pulling out stops like that, and it's like I think people kind of catch on to that.
Yeah, that's right.
That it's a little bit of a stage kind of a thing. So I don't know. So we have the House and now the Senate passed the whole foreign aid bill, which includes a TikTok sale ban. Doesn't include the Senate part does not include the border security that the House had passed. But Biden if he hasn't signed it by now, he said he's going to sign it as soon as it hits his desk, and so I don't know when it hits his desk. So aid will be flowing to Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan and whatnot.
Right.
But so that's and I looked at the Senate vote and I thought, okay, well, you got a whole bunch of Republicans who voted against it too, but I think that to me, I wondered whether or not some of those Republicans, they figured they knew they weren't going to defeat this thing, so they could vote against it because it was going to win by a comfortable majority anyway, and that was a safe vote for them to say we're standing on our principle for why we think this is a bad idea, and so that they'll be recorded as such. I don't know. I mean, we've talked about this. Once again, what is exactly the plan? What are you going to do? What are you going to do with it? That's the thing. That's the thing that always is getting me now is that, okay, so you're going to give them this money, but what's going to happen? What are
you're giving them weapons. You're not really even giving them cash. So you're saying, go fight this war that you're not, this is not enough to knock Russia out of your country. Right. And we would not vote you enough to knock Russia out of your country. But this keeps you at it a little bit longer, right? Maybe you figure out something, maybe Putin changes his mind, whatever, but it keeps it going a little longer. And that's really all that they're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I
don't know if I get the point of not trying to figure out like what's after this, right? Because right now, it's not going to get better as it is.
Yeah, I want to know whether or not Zelensky submitted a request for they had a request for a proposal to say outline exactly what you plan to do with this aid that we're going to give you, so that we know what what all the points are to see whether or not you're going to measure up to this this deal, and try to hold the country. And if you're going to start giving out aid, I think maybe more accountability on this.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Weapon systems, right? You're trying to fight a war. Here are the actual tanks, howitzers, whatever, right? You don't get cash that you can share with your buddies. You get stuff to fight war. You work the rest of that out yourself.
Yeah. It's graft of moving around a tank and howitzer is a little bit harder.
Right. That's right.
It's like, hey, here, I'll give you a tank. Where are you going to store it?
Yeah. What are you going to use?
Yeah.
May not want to know that. Imagine going to homecoming in a tank. Let's go, baby. Anyway.
Yeah, I always kind of wonder with tanks when you've seen these videos and stuff like that of like an old tank, going down a roadway or something like that, and it's like, exactly how much damage does that do to the road? Because I mean, how heavy is that thing?
Right. That's one of the things that's coming up with electric cars now is like, the guardrails, like you go off the road, you hit the rail. Okay. The rail's strong enough to withstand your car. It kind of bounces you back onto the road. It hurts, messes up your car, but you live. You don't go over the ditch. Right. But these electric cars are too heavy for the guardrail. So, like in New Jersey, they're going to charge you a fee for having an electric car that they're going to use to strengthen the guardrails and make the highways more solid because the extra weight is breaking down the highways faster.
Well, they've been for years. I think a lot of jurisdictions have been charging a few $100s a year to the EV owners to make up for the lost gas tax, or what they thought was the equivalent of the lost gas tax. But there's a lot more to that, as you're kind of getting into, because the cars are heavy, because the battery is so heavy that there's so much potential for more damage. They probably ought to have a higher fine or whatever, just fee for that, for having that vehicle on the road, for the potential of what goes on there. It's interesting though too. I had lunch yesterday with a financial advisor, and we meet once a year and just kind of talk about a lot of different things. Actually, we almost never talk about finances, which is always pretty funny. It's been like sports. He even talked to me about a documentary he saw on a football club in England out of Burnley that was apparently purchased by a bunch of Latter-day Saints, and stuff like that, and how they were down in one of the lower rungs, and then they got elevated up to the Premier League, and then promptly were not competitive, and then got re-regulated down again, and stuff like that, so that they're up and down battle. And I was like, well, that might be kind of interesting, because you see a lot of people who now are starting to invest, foreigners investing in these clubs, people just average, people who've got a lot of money to burn, they could get together and like, oh yeah, I think it'll be fun to own a British soccer club. Let's go and buy that. We don't necessarily know what we're doing, but let's go and do it. What the heck, and stuff like that. But he said that 2 years ago, he put down a deposit for a Rivian truck, and after 2 years, they still couldn't deliver. And this is a little bit like Tesla in the early going. Tesla took deposits like $100 or $300, but it took them over 2 years to deliver the first cars from the time they took deposits from people. They had a very long list of people that were waiting for cars, at the beginning. But he has apparently had a neighbor that has a Rivian, and I was talking to him. I said, the thing about these cars too, and even the modern cars, the more late model US cars, even just the gas cars, is that we now have all these sensors in the bumper, right, and all kinds of cameras and all these kinds of things. So why does auto insurance go up? Because your car has become a sophisticated computer all the way around, and you damage that. You're now damaging electronics, not just this piece of fiberglass or whatever it is. And he said his neighbor told him that if he damaged the bumper on the Rivian, that alone was $15,000. Because he's just like, and I'm like, why?
It's not practical. I think that's part of the design. Is they don't want it to be practical. They want it to be almost impossible to drive your own car.
Yeah, well, he said that they have a new colleague, fairly recently, guy who joined their firm, and I guess he got into an accident with his Tesla in November, and he just got his car back. Because there's while these cars are, maybe cool, and they have some it factor or whatever it is, the thing, you're fine until you get into an accident or some other issue where there's very few options as to how to repair it and where to repair it. And the
Right.
parts they don't flow like they do for the major cars. It's not GM and Ford, and these guys where they can get these parts pretty quickly. The Tesla thing is a lot slower. The electric EV thing is a lot slower to do. And the way the cars are built it just requires a lot more work than the standard car to go and fix. I mean, you can't take your Tesla to
They
the
don't really
shop.
want you to fix them. They don't really want it, like when it starts breaking, they want you to get a new one.
Yeah, but you just can't take your Tesla, your EV anywhere. Just that limits the ability, in terms of what's going to go and happen, all of that. And I'll get back to that in a minute. What about? Well, I want to ask you this too, though. But part of this thing, is this TikTok sale or ban or whatever. TikTok, the owners have already said that, if that's signed into law, that they're going to challenge it as unconstitutional. I mean, they had some kind of ban. I don't know if it was exactly written the same language, but they tried to do this in Montana, and they weren't, they got repealed, I believe. Got struck down. So I don't know. I mean, you have any feelings about, whether or not is this constitutional in your mind? I mean, neither one of us are lawyers. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Are we going too far with this?
Well, I mean, I think it's censorship, and we shouldn't be censoring people. Yeah, it's a bad algorithm, and it's causing people to be neurotic and mean and hateful and all this stuff. And that's true. That's true. But that's we've always said either we trust the Constitution or we don't, right? And we've always said the counter to bad speech is more speech that sets it aright. So if you're gonna say, oh, we're just gonna, anything that we look at that doesn't fit our content needs. I mean, right now it's one that all the Republicans can kind of say, yeah, those communists are talking to our kids and they're making our daughters want to become boys, and they're causing all this unrest and drug use and all this kind of stuff. Okay. But the next time somebody decides something may be offensive, it may be because it's conservative, right? I mean, that's, there's a lot of precedent already for conservatives. The left censoring conservatives, right? The big tech censored conservatives. The 51 Intel agents trying to censor the New York Post story on Hunter Biden's laptop before the election, all that kind of stuff. So there's a long history of the government censoring, and almost all comes from the left. And if we enter into something where we say censorship is okay this time because this one's really bad, right, then we are opening the door to all the other stuff they want to censor, right? And it'll be our message that ends up not getting out.
Has Trump shifted his opinion about this a little bit or not?
I don't know what does Trump say about it?
It seems that he's, because he was big on, let's get this thing sold or whatever. He seemed to have backed off of that a little bit.
I think he sees it as a free speech issue, right?
Yeah.
And it is.
Yeah, and see, and my position on this is just that the Chinese government, they banned like Facebook and some of these other things. It's like, are we going to be like China?
Right.
Is that our standard? Is that because China did it, we're going to ban, they banned American, apps, these social media things. We're now going to go back. We're going to go and ban this Chinese, owned app. That's bad. I mean, I think that's bad.
Right. And it's worse is Australia, right? Australia is trying to get, so there was a video of someone stabbing a priest in Sydney. And Australia, the government of Australia said that, Elon Musk not only must take that down from X in Australia, he should take it down everywhere. He shouldn't be allowed to show that video to be shown anywhere. Well, Australia does not, if it wants to be a fascist nation, it can be a fascist nation, but it's not allowed to dictate that to the rest of the world, right? Your censorship standards are for your country. Right. And I still say we should not be sharing any weapon systems or intelligence or anything with Australia until the fascists are no longer in control. I mean, it is a dangerously anti-freedom country now, and we shouldn't be involved with them. They're not an ally.
Yeah, I mean, if they want to block it in their country, they have the right to
censor you whatever you want to censor.
Yeah.
And look what they did in COVID, right? They had your phone, or if you walked outside your house, some government person came over and made you go back in. Like, no, where did I play in that?
Yeah, once again, it reminds me of China, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the British Crown colonies are not good at freedom. They didn't, that Magna Carta was for others, right? It doesn't really pertain to them. They're terrible at it. New Zealand's terrible, although New Zealand's trying to recover. Canada's awful, on human rights. It's just recently gotten significantly worse. Like, what's wrong with the British Crown colonies? Can't blame Hong Kong. China took care of that. But
yeah, no,
the rest of them, it's their own people. It's what they were taught by their overlords.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that. All right, I meant to also mention too. We need to have a little discussion here about this hush money trial that is now started and everything. It's Trump seems to be testing, I guess, the limits of the gag order. It's Trump being Trump, for part of that. But once
shouldn't be a gag order, right?
Yeah, no. Well,
you can't play in that arena. Don't get in that arena.
I think there was a Boston University professor who said he'd watched the first couple of days of the trial and he just like, this is political. I don't think this guy was a conservative. I think, he says it's blatantly political because the charges, are vague. I mean, they're trying to do this as, election fraud, as part of the thing. And
it depends on an underlying crime, right?
Yeah.
You're doing this to forward an underlying crime, and they won't tell you what they think the underlying crime is.
Right. They've been very vague about all of this. And I guess this guy's a law professor. He just thinks like this doesn't really hold water at this point in time. And I just don't see where this is going to help the Democrat side at all. I mean, it's, Trump can, he makes some noise. It's like, I should be out there campaigning and doing whatever, even though he does, after he leaves, he can do whatever the court every day, he can do whatever he wants, and do whatever he wants on the weekends and stuff like that. But, he's still leveraging, this trial to his advantage.
Yeah.
And, it's the Democrats, they should be trying to pull the plug on these things rather than let them go through, because if you don't want Donald Trump to be elected and get this extra airtime, in essence, this is it. You think back about when Trump got elected in 2016, the media was falling all over itself to cover all these MAGA rallies all over the place. It's like, and he got so much free publicity, it was ridiculous. He didn't have to spend anything really on ads because the networks just covered his rallies and let him, watch the speeches and stuff like that. And that just helped, Trump a lot. I don't, like I always said too. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with everything that Trump says. Sometimes I wish he would just shut up. But it's, you cover a trial, and he's saying, look, this is just a sham. I'm being persecuted. This is all political. By covering it, I think that gives people. I think people start to think like, yeah, exactly what is going on here. Why are we prosecuting this guy?
Right. Why did you take a case that 4 other prosecutors turned down? That, in fact, Bragg himself had turned it down.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, some guy shows up from the number 3 guy from Maine Justice shows up, and you change your mind about the viability of this case, right? And they're catching Biden meddling in all these cases. I don't know if the last day or so, Judge Cannon down in Florida has unsealed a bunch of documents that show that the Biden administration was riding herd on Jack Smith to do this, and that Jack Smith's attorneys called in Walt Nauta's attorney, Walt Nauta is one of Trump's aides who's been charged in the Mar-a-Lago documents thing, and said, we understand you're up for a judgeship, and it'd be a shame if anything happened to your candidacy for that judgeship, so you would want to be, we're just hoping that things will go well with Walt talking about Trump, and then you will be a judge, right? I mean, it's pretty explicitly stated, what he's saying there. It's very, mafioso. It'd be ashamed of what happened to your nice judgeship. You know, and he's gonna get off because of prosecutorial misconduct down there. He's gonna get off of the ones in D.C. over the 1512. There's not going to be enough left of that indictment to make it worth pursuing. You know, Trump is very close to being home free on this stuff.
Yeah, and then where does the administration look on that they spent all this time and money, you know,
right,
prosecuting,
didn't get him, and then, you know, then your only choice is to try again, right? You can't, at that point, you can't let up. I mean, it's just going to get worse and worse. The other thing is, like, you know, Biden is becoming less electable, right? His poll numbers are going down, right? They keep trying to say, oh, well, there was this other poll over here, you know, but, you know, he's like on Rasmussen, he's gone from 44 to 39 in the last week and a half, and he's stuck at 39. 39 is a bad number for him on that poll, because that poll, everybody thinks Rasmussen's a conservative poller, but he's had Trump, I mean, Biden in the 40s, even the mid 40s, when all these other RCP averages and all that stuff were below 40, right? Rasmussen has been extremely bullish on Trump, on Biden's popularity. And now they have him at 39. You know, and the polls that are coming out saying who would handle the issues better. And they go through the economy and crime and immigration, foreign policy, and so forth. And Biden is getting crushed on those. The only one that he is at parity on is abortion. And abortion, according to the poll I saw yesterday, abortion is now a deciding factor in the votes of about as many people as global warming. Right? So you're going to have abortion voters, global warming voters, people who on both sides, right? Global warming probably favors them a little more. Abortion is pretty close to a push. And who actually votes on that issue? I'm not saying who favors abortion. I'm saying the people who, that's what determines who they vote for. There's about as many of them on either side of the question, right? And, you know, polling has pretty consistently shown that. So, you know, you got about 5 or 6% of the people who care at all about abortion in this election. So you may be able to win. You know, you got to figure that Biden will do better among those 5 or 6 than Trump, but, you know, it's not enough better. It's not, you know, not when, you know, you have 30, 40-point leads on the economy and the immigration and foreign policy. You can't overcome that with 5% caring about abortion.
Yeah,
the numbers no longer add up.
Yeah, I mean, you can say a lot of different things about the economy. It depends on where you look. I mean, but you know, the Biden administration can't find a way to find a message that works for the economy because, you know, they thought they had
the facts. You know, everybody knows. I mean, unless you can make gas go back to $2 a gallon and grocery prices fall by 25%, you're not going to convince people. And none of that's available to him between now and November. Gas price will probably go up. You know, we're just getting to the summer blend season. You know, gas gets a natural 4 or 5 cents a gallon bump in the spring as we switch to the summer blends, and you know, it's already going up. It's already gone up every day of the last 3 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, the part of the thing that they were touting was just like how inflation was cooling, right? And then we've hit this patch recently where it's been kind of stuck. You know, it's gone up maybe a tick
up a bit, yeah, because you know, energy fuels all that. Every energy affects the price of everything. The price of energy goes up, everything costs more.
Yeah, so their message on Bidenomics, you know, gets largely derailed when stuff like this happens. You know, they're trying to tell people, you know, inflation is getting better, things are getting better, and stuff like that, and all of that. But you know, I was reading a Wall Street Journal article the other day about Chipotle, and despite the fact that they've been raising prices, you know, as their cost of labor and ingredients has gone up, you know, people are still going to Chipotle, and they were saying like in the last 4 years, the price of dining out has gone up 29%.
Yeah.
And so this is where a lot of people, they slow down their dining out, or they stop altogether. They try to make things at home, but they're being hit hard, you know, by these inflationary pressures all the way around. And as you know, we've said before too, it's just that, you know, these prices that we're paying for some of our basic goods, they're not going back down to where they were a few years ago. It's like, they have risen and given us a new kind of bar, in terms of this is where it is. Milk is always going to be at this level or higher now. It's not going to go lower, in general. Milk and eggs, they vary a little bit, but it's not going to go for the level it has been now for the last, say, 6 months to what it was 2 or 3 years ago. Years ago, when it was when we had some cheap products going out there. It's just not happening, and people have to, they're learning to try. How do we budget for all of this now that everything is so much more expensive than it was before?
Your belt is tightened, no matter how much money you make in this country. That's what I'm looking for. If you see this, please send it to me. And anybody out there who sees it, please send it to me. Polling on the presidential race by income level, right? Because like I was out there predicting Trump was going to win in 2016 before anyone I knew. You are crazy. She's way ahead. I'm like, Trump was ahead from like 11 points from 35,000 a year to 75,000 a year household income. He was ahead by about 8 or 9 points from 75,000 to 125,000. That's most of America. You get outside the big cities, almost everybody in America is between 35 and 125, right? That's that's 95% of the people in the country, right? Working people in the country. And if you're up 10 or 11% on those guys, you can't really lose. There's too many of them. That phalanx is too big.
Well, you never know. I mean, our Joe keeps performing well since his little comment that suggested that his uncle was eaten by cannibals. Papua New Guinea did not like that.
Yeah, the funniest part about that was like the number of Democrat publications that almost immediately came out. Well, you know what? That could be true. Like, no, it's not true.
Well, there was a report too that said that the thing is that the plane that his uncle was on like crashed in the ocean, right?
Yeah,
it didn't. So I mean, it didn't even hit land.
So they got him out of the water and ate him.
They got him out of the water and ate him. They found him. They found the wreckage.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's why he is kind of that's why it's so hard for the Democrats, because 4 years ago you could tuck him away in his basement and you could do that, and the anti-Trump sentiment was fairly strong and stuff like that, but the situation has just changed dramatically. For them. He's a real candidate and he's got to defend himself, and then he goes out and he says this stuff, and you're like, okay, if you just suggest that the guy his mental capability, acuity is not quite there, just run up these clips, and you're like, you
can make a huge highlight reel of.
Yeah, you don't have to editorialize and anything. Just put the clips together. They speak for themselves.
Yep.
And
they can't deny it. It's him.
Yeah, we still got 6+ months to go. There'll be a lot more. He's not done. He's not done yet.
That's right. You saw the one, I guess, last night. He said, how many times is Trump going to prove that we can't be trusted?
Yeah.
Like,
oops.
I don't know how many.
Yeah, it's like, and he just said it, not realizing he had said it, right?
Yeah. He just moved right along. Like, okay.
Just kept going. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's got to be pretty tough to when he's out there speaking. It's like, okay, we're hoping for as mistake-free a speech, anything we can get, but it's pretty hard to do that with Joe these days and everything like that. Okay, now you mentioned a little bit about these Columbia protests and stuff like this. This has been a huge meltdown. I mean, the takeover, the left wing. I mean, all kinds of different things are going on there. I mean, I guess they're going to say, if you're not a student at Columbia, you can't enter the campus. Things like that. The Columbia president is trying to get them off the campus. And get these kids to go back to class. They've gone to a virtual classroom setting
for the rest of the semester, which is almost over.
Yeah, it's almost over.
About 2 or 3 weeks. But imagine being a senior, and you worked your butt off for 4 years, and you get to the end. It's like, well, don't really come around because, if you're a Jew, you might get beat up. We're not going to protect you. right? President's awful. The president of that school is awful.
Well, and you have some fairly high profile people that are Columbia grads or supporters, like Robert Kraft and things like that, was saying, like, no more money.
No more money. Yeah.
You
You got to do better than this. When you're allowing Kristallnacht on your campus, right? You can't do that. This is not a protest. This is a Klan rally.
Yeah, and so the left, who's been demonstrating, I mean, part of it is that they're like, but we have the right to free speech. Well, you do, but there are rules that are to be followed. Columbia is a private university, and so they can set the ground rules for what you can do and cannot do, and you need to abide by that. And the administration had let this go way too far, and now they've got a huge problem on their hands that they're trying to figure out how they quell all these issues.
Right, because they're saying they won't leave until Columbia divests in all things Israel. Right, and it's like, if you give in to that demand, right, then you'll be giving in to demands like that and even more ridiculous from now on. There's no basis for saying no. And if you don't give in to that demand, then they have no plan in place to ever have a viable campus again. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's always interesting how majority of the stuff is happening in the Ivy League.
Right, the supposedly most educated people. So,
yeah.
I'll tell you the other thing that's happening, and this is a big, I don't know, you saw somebody, it was a Jewish guy too, who puts out a thing the other day. He goes, Jewish parents, I say to you, don't send your kid to the Ivy. Send them to a school with a big football stadium and, go cheer for the teams, meet all the people, make all the friends, establish all the job connections, get a really good education, save a lot of money, right? And it's, they're obliged to at least treat you fairly, right? Most of them, So yeah, it's quite a thing.
All right, let's wrap it up. Go ahead and take us out.
Take us out. Let's see what's on our list that we have not covered here. Google fired 54. Yeah, so that's interesting. Google, there was a Google employees had a on-campus protest. And it was like, they had their little poems, what does Google say in Rye? Palestinians have to die. And, they had their little rhymes and stuff going, and they got fired, right? You don't have a right to get fired. You don't have, that's it.
Well, they were
you have a right to go in and tell your boss they're haters.
Yeah. They were disrupting Google's business.
That's right. And when the Republican company did that, they would be all about their free speech rights, this, that, the other, as it was when they took people off the line at Columbia the other day. But, since they're the right values were defended, blah, 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 blah. And Fetterman said that Romney should take over Harvard. I think that's a pretty harmless place for Romney. Okay, he's an interesting guy, Fetterman. He keeps saying stuff that we do. Yeah. You have Roman Gabriel down here. Roman Gabriel was from Wilmington, North Carolina. The other two famous sports stars from Wilmington, North Carolina are Sonny Jurgensen and, of course, the great Michael Jordan. R.I.P. to him. Also to Dickie Betts, the great guitarist for the Allman Brothers Band, who died this week. And let's see. The wind farms collapse still is good. You're going to see more and more of that. Without federal money, wind farm is not a viable business.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing I was reading was just that New York City had been, they been contracted with these people to deliver the power it basically was 5 times the cost of natural gas and coal.
Yeah.
And it was going to be on the ratepayers. Ridiculous.
Yeah. You can't do it.
Yeah. All righty, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. As always, please stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And God bless America. I will be on a jet plane next week, so we will see you in 2 weeks. So buckle up and get ready for some more action in 2 weeks. We'll see you then.